The shooter in Oregon, whose name I have yet to have said on the radio, and I don't plan on doing it anytime soon, because he explicitly said, you know, hey, look at this. You kill a bunch of people, your name becomes famous. Isn't that cool? And I think that, you know, there's a number of people thinking that way. So maybe if the media were to stop, you know, this is where the day after the killing, I was calling on the New York Times to take his picture off the front page and take his name out of the headline. I don't mind his name being on paragraph 17 of the article. I mean, you do have to report the news, but the headline? Anyhow, turns out that this young man was apparently on a lot of drugs, which immediately set off my alert signals in my brain and caused me to say to Louise and Sean, we need to talk to Peter Breggin. Dr. Peter Breggin is a practicing psychiatrist. He's the author of numerous articles and books, including Medication Madness, The Role of Psychiatric Drugs in Cases of Violence, Suicide, and Crime, and his most recent book, Guilt, Shame, and Anxiety, Understanding and Overcoming Negative Emotions. His website is Breggin, BREGGIN.com. Dr. Breggin, welcome back to our program.
Well, I'm always glad to talk to your great and wonderful audience and to get facts out.
Thank you. And it's unfortunate. It's always nice talking to you. It's unfortunate that we keep doing this right after one of these mass shootings. What do we know about this young man and his medication history, and what might that have to do with his having murdered all these people?
Well, a colleague of mine sent me a photo of his Facebook with a quote on it. There's nothing else around that quote, other conversation, but it says, August 16th, that's less than 2 months ago, I have a pill bottle with like 5 types of pills in it. I don't know which ones are the sleep aids, so I just took 4 of each. So it sounds like he's been loaded up with psych drugs. Then we have another recent quote about his mother saying that she would put him in a mental hospital at least once when he stopped taking his medications. Probably the mom was bamboozled and thought that it was, you know, he was desperate to have his meds when he was probably going into withdrawal when he stopped his medications. And I also have some new information that hasn't been gone out very much on the Aurora shooter. Again, we won't mention names. Mm-hmm. And I was a medical expert in a part of that case. And he was taking Zoloft from the day he went to his psychiatrist and told her that he was feeling so violent that he couldn't even tell her how violent because it wouldn't be good for him to tell her. And instead of getting him to tell, she put him that first day on Zoloft. And he was on Zoloft for several months, during which time he then began the violent plans for the attack on the Aurora Theater. And he took the Zoloft up about 20 days before, but by then he was in a really psychotic state.
Wow. Now, so, is Zoloft a benzo drug or an SSRI?
Yeah, oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, it's an SSRI. It's very similar to Prozac or Lexapro or any of those drugs, Paxil.
Right.
And this combines with the other information, another case that I had real opportunity to look at because I was a medical expert around it, and that is the Eric Harris. He was taking Luvox, which is very similar to Zoloft and Paxil, fluvoxamine.
He was one of the Columbine shooters, right?
Yes, yeah, he was one of the Columbine shooters. And Eric Harris, I've seen his medical record as well as I just mentioned, the Aurora shooter's medical record. And he was put on SSRIs about a year before the shooting. There's no evidence. He was very disturbed. He was put on it for obsessive thoughts. And you can see him just get more and more disturbed as the year of exposure goes on, gets more and more manic and psychotic and violent. And we know he was taking the SSRI, Luvox, right up to the shooting because he had, and this is so ironic, Tom, he had a, quote, therapeutic level in his bloodstream on his death. And I've confirmed that from the coroner's office. I've confirmed it from FDA reports that was sent in by the manufacturer. But the press ignores all of this. The press is, USA Today actually came out and said Eric Harris was not on psychiatric drugs at the time of the shooting, and I sent them the data on the FDA report and so on, and they just wouldn't change it.
So my understanding of the mechanism of action here, and the reason why it seems that so many of these shooters have been on SSRI drugs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor drugs, as opposed to other kinds of anti-anxiety drugs like the benzodiazepines, for example, the old Valium drugs, is that by inhibiting the reuptake of serotonin, what SSRI drugs do is they increase, the theory is they increase brain levels of this neurotransmitter serotonin, but the body senses the fact that the serotonin levels are too high, and so it starts growing new, whatever the cells are that uptake, that dissolve out the serotonin to maintain normal levels. And, because the body's always trying to achieve homeostasis. And that's A, the mechanism of addiction, and B, the mechanism or part of the mechanism by which that high levels of serotonin, that people's affect, that their emotions are flattened. Do I have that right?
Yeah, you got it basically right. About as good a summary as I've heard on the air. There are three different mechanisms, I won't get into them, which fight the effect of SSRIs and actually drive down the stimulating effect that the drug is having on the serotonin, producing a very unstable, unpredictable state. And that results in a lot of different emotions that lead to violence. Sometimes, really quite often, the people become flat, as you mentioned, and they lose their empathy, their caring. But at the same time, there's something about these drugs that agitates people in a terrible way and often makes them feel very, very violent and very disturbed. And then finally, among the various clinical syndromes this produces, it actually can cause psychosis of a manic kind with violence.
I'm sorry.
Looking at Columbine, looking at Aurora, those young men were in manic-like psychoses caused by the drugs. we have about a minute and a half left here, sir. We are, everybody's pointing out the fact that we are 5% of the world's population, and we have 50% of the guns in civilians' hands on the entire planet Earth. Is it possible that being 5% of the population, we also prescribe more than 50% of the world's SSRI drugs? Does anybody know? Yeah, we are the dumping ground. We are the source of funding for the whole pharmaceutical industry. We get more of the drugs and we pay more for the drugs. And I think as a third factor, we probably watch a lot more violent video games than the rest of the world, since we're the biggest consumer of everything. And you put together the availability of the guns with the stimulating effect of the drugs, and then the fact that a lot of these youngsters are getting heavily involved in the video games. Right. And also many of them have been shamed in school. So those are the kinds of factors.
So very quickly, if somebody's on SSRIs or their child is on SSRIs, how do they get them off?
Well, you want to come off slow, and you want to come off at a pace that the person can bear if they're at home, and you want to keep a close eye on them, because stopping SSRIs often produces very painful emotional and even physical withdrawals, and it can stimulate irritability and anger and violence, and it can crash into suicide. So it's good to get a team around you if you can, of a prescriber. It doesn't have to be the psychiatrist or whoever started the drug, maybe your family doc. Get a therapist if you can, and the family needs to be with the person who's coming off the drugs.
And decrease the dosage over what period of time?
Oh, just go very slow. I describe this in detail in Psychiatric Drug Withdrawal.
Psychiatric Drug Withdrawal is the title of the book?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Dr. Peter Breggin, the author of Psychiatric Drug Withdrawal and Medication Madness and Guilt, Shame, and Anxiety. Breggin, BREGGIN.com is the website. Thank you, Dr. Breggin.
Tom, thank you so much for having me on.